I didn't even change shoes. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the hospital, still in my house sweater phone clenched in one hand. The voicemail had been short-left by one of Derek's co-workers, just enough to tell me he'd collapsed at the office. Nothing from Mara. Not a call, not even a text. My heart had already dropped before I turned into the parking garage. The elevator ride up felt endless. I half ran down the ICU hallway, eyes scanning the names posted outside each room chest tight. That's when I saw her tall with dark scrubs, her badge half obscured by a stethoscope. She stepped into my path and pressed a hand to my arm. "Are you Lynette Harrow?" she asked, low voice, urgent. "Yes, I'm Derek's mother." "Don't go in," she said quickly. "Hide. Just trust me. Please." Her hand gently tugged at my sleeve. "Come with me." I should have argued, should have asked questions. But something in her eyes, tense, unwavering, made me follow. She led me to a small medication prep room down the hall, pulled the door halfway shut, and nodded toward the narrow crack that left just enough view of Derek's room. "Wait here," she whispered, and disappeared. I stepped closer to the door and peered through. Mara sat at Derek's bedside, one hand resting on his arm. She wasn't crying. There was no panic in her body. Her lips moved softly, smiling. Her hair was perfect. A man stood beside her. Not a doctor. No badge. Just a sleek sport coat and expensive watch's face, too calm for someone watching another man sleep with a tube in his throat. Then Mara leaned into him. Her voice was barely audible, but I caught it, just one line. "He signed everything. It's just a matter of days." The man nodded. No expression. Just agreement. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Behind the door, I could hear the machines keeping my son alive. And in front of me, I watched the two people who didn't want him to wake up. I couldn't tear my eyes away from them. The way Mara tucked her hair behind her ear, all soft gestures and rehearsed concern, it didn't fit. Not with the words I'd just heard. Not with the way the man beside her stood, hands in his pockets, like he was waiting for a valet. Then he turned slightly, and I saw his face more clearly. Tristan, Derek's business partner. I'd met him once, maybe twice, at a launch party a year ago. He had that polished kind of charm that made people lean in without knowing why. I'd never paid him much attention. I should have. A quiet shift of air behind me made me turn. Callie had returned, her expression unreadable. "Did you hear it?" she asked, barely above a whisper. I nodded. My mouth was dry. Callie stepped into the prep room with me and gently closed the door just enough to keep it cracked. She kept her voice low. "I've been watching her," she said. "Your daughter-in-law. She comes in at odd hours, sometimes unannounced, touches the IVs, talks to the staff like she owns the place." I gripped the edge of the counter beside me. "She never asks about the vitals," Callie continued. "Never about test results, but she always checks the machines. And lately, she's been pushing for DNR paperwork to be added to his chart. What I didn't let it through," she said quickly. "Not without the attending's approval. But she keeps circling." I glanced back through the crack in the door. Mara now had her hand resting on Tristan's forearm. They looked like people closing a deal. "What are they doing to him?" I whispered. Callie's eyes stayed fixed on the other room. "I don't know yet, but I think she's counting on him not waking up. And I think it's time we stop trusting what's on the surface." I watched Tristan pull something from his coat pocket and slide it into Mara's bag. She didn't even look at it. Then she leaned down and kissed my son on the cheek like she loved him. I barely remembered the drive home. My hands stayed clenched around the steering wheel long after the car stopped. My mind kept replaying the way Mara smiled, as if Derek's life was already over. That man, Tristan, sliding something into her bag. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it wasn't good. Back in my kitchen, I sat down at the table and opened my laptop. Months ago, Derek had emailed me copies of some documents backups just in case something ever happened to his work laptop. At the time, I hadn't looked closely. I trusted him. I trusted her. I searched his name in my inbox and pulled up a shared folder. Contracts, bank statements, and corporation papers. And there, buried under a file labeled Home Refinance, was a scanned PDF. The title hit me first: Full Transfer of Business Ownership and Property Rights. I clicked it open. Derek's signature was at the bottom. The date just 2 weeks ago. Mara's name was everywhere. Sole recipient of his share in the company, beneficiary of all joint assets. Even the house was listed under her name, with Derek's signature giving consent for the title transfer. There was no hesitation in the wording. It read like he'd planned to disappear. I couldn't stop shaking. I printed the document and walked across the street to Greta's house. She opened the door, still wearing gardening gloves. "I need you to look at this," I said, handing her the pages. Greta sat me down. "Read through everything," then looked up slowly. "If this stands," she said, "she owns everything. The business, the house, the accounts." I couldn't understand it. Derek had just told me a month ago that he was planning to bring in a second investor. He had blueprints on his coffee table. Expansion wasn't a dream, it was happening. Unless he contests this himself, Greta added, there's no legal way to reverse it. But Derek was unconscious. And if Mara had her way, he wouldn't be waking up to contest anything. I didn't sleep. I watched the sun rise from my kitchen window and drove back to the hospital before the morning staff rotation. I kept the printouts folded in my coat pocket, my fingers pressed to the creases like they might come undone if I let go. Callie met me near the vending machines. She didn't ask if I was okay. Maybe she already knew the answer. "There's no camera in the room," she said quietly. "Not the kind that records. ICU doesn't monitor audio or video unless there's an alert. But I have something." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small black device, flat no bigger than a deck of cards. "Motion-activated voice recorder," she said. "We use them for training sometimes. I can slip it behind the cabinet near the vent. It won't catch everything, but if she's saying things to him when no one's around." I nodded before she finished. That afternoon, I waited in the family lounge while Callie went in under the guise of adjusting Derek's IV. She walked out 10 minutes later with a clipboard and a nod. Now we waited. The hospital quieted at night. Fewer staff in the halls, fewer eyes. I sat by the vending machine pretending to read a magazine. When Mara arrived after visiting hours, no one stopped her. She moved like she belonged. I counted the minutes. I didn't need a recorder to feel what was happening. Later, Callie handed me a pair of earbuds and played it back from her phone. The room was mostly silence, then a rustle, the sound of a chair sliding closer to the bed. And Mara's voice, soft and low. "You were always too soft, Derek. You wanted to believe everyone was good. That's why it had to be me." I closed my eyes. My chest tightened. "But don't worry," she whispered. "You did your part. You signed what mattered. Just sleep now. We'll take care of the rest." The recording ended with the sound of her zipping her bag. By morning, Callie found me in the hallway, dark circles under her eyes. She didn't speak right away, just pressed a small flash drive into my hand. "You should listen to this somewhere private," she said. At home, I plugged it into my laptop. The sound was muffled at first, shuffling feet, the hum of machines, but then came Mara's voice, steady and sharp. "Once they pull the machines, I'll file the claim." There was a pause, then Tristan's low reply. "Make sure you act fast. The accounts transfer automatically within 48 hours. I stopped the recording. My stomach turned. Every word sounded rehearsed, like they'd said it a dozen times before. I drove straight to Greta's. She was still in her robe, her coffee untouched. "It's all on here," I told her. Her voice, his voice. "They're planning it." She listened carefully, not interrupting once. When it ended, she exhaled slowly. "This is enough to request an injunction. It'll freeze everything tied to Derek's name until the court reviews it. She sat at her desk and began typing. But you need to understand, if he doesn't survive, those transfers could still stand. She'll argue it was his intent. We need something that proves coercion or forgery. I'll get it, I said, though I had no idea how. Greta finished the paperwork and printed it. Take this to the clerk's office before noon. Once it's filed, Mara won't be able to touch $1 until a judge rules. By the time I returned to the hospital, Callie was waiting outside Derek's room. She was here again this morning, she whispered. Asked the staff when the machines would be reviewed for removal. I clutched the papers in my hand until the edges dug into my skin. She's not going to get that chance. Callie nodded once her expression grim. Then we'd better move faster than she thinks we can. The call came just after lunch. Callie's voice was clipped. She's here, and she brought paperwork. I arrived within 15 minutes and slipped into the hallway outside Derek's room. The door was open just enough. Mara stood inside, dressed immaculately, a leather folder tucked under one arm. She handed a packet of documents to the attending physician, her voice light but urgent. This is an addendum to Derek's will, she said. We signed it 3 days before the collapse. It gives me full medical authority and clarifies the remainder of his assets should anything progress. The doctor flipped through the pages, frowning. This needs to go through our legal department. It's notarized, Mara replied smoothly. It should be added to his file today. Callie stood beside the doctor, arms crossed. We still need internal verification. There are procedures. I stepped behind a supply cart. Inside the room, Mara moved to the side of Derek's bed. She glanced over her shoulder once, then reached for the IV tube. My breath caught. But Callie stepped in fast. There's a code blue down the hall, she said to the doctor, loud enough for the hall to hear. We need backup. Now. 2 nurses appeared. The doctor excused himself. Mara hesitated, her hand frozen near the drip chamber. I'll come back later, she muttered, scooping up the folder. She left the room. I waited until her heels disappeared down the corridor before slipping inside. Derek's hand had shifted. His fingers curled slightly on the blanket. I stood there staring at the shape of his knuckles, trying to steady my breathing as the machines clicked and hummed beside us. The next morning started in a courthouse instead of a hospital. Greta and I sat on a hard wooden bench, waiting for the judge to review the emergency motion. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Greta's didn't. She'd done this before, and her steadiness grounded me. The hearing lasted less than 10 minutes. The judge read through the affidavit, the recording transcript. He signed the injunction with a decisive stroke of his pen. All financial and property transfers are hereby suspended until further review. Greta exhaled. She can't touch a cent now, she said quietly. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like a warning bell. People like Mara didn't stop when money froze. They found new routes. When I returned to the hospital, she was already there, standing in the waiting area, phone pressed to her ear, voice low and deliberate. The moment she saw me, she hung up. So she said, crossing her arms, I hear you've been busy, filing papers, talking to staff, poking your nose where it doesn't belong. I didn't answer. She stepped closer. The faint scent of her perfume made my stomach twist. You don't understand how things work, Lynette. Derek trusted me. He made his decisions long before any of this happened. You're making it harder for everyone. He trusted the wrong person, I said softly. Her eyes narrowed. You're too old to play hero. I met her gaze. And you're too arrogant to realize when you've already lost. For the first time, her face cracked. The practiced calm slipped for half a second before she turned and walked away, heels striking sharp against the tile. Callie appeared from behind the reception desk a moment later, holding a small folder. It's official, she said. The freeze order's been processed. She can't go near the accounts or the records. I nodded, the tension inside me tightening instead of fading. Freezing the money was one thing, but Derek was still lying in that bed, and she wasn't finished with him yet. The first time his eyes moved, it was barely a flicker. A flutter beneath heavy lids, a twitch of muscle. But it was real. Callie noticed it before I did, and she was the one who whispered, "He's coming back." By the next morning, Derek was awake. Groggy, unfocused, but awake. Mara was already in the room when I arrived. She stood by his bed, speaking in a tone too sweet to be natural. "You scared me so much," she said, brushing his hair back. "But you're okay now. We've handled everything. It's all taken care of." His gaze drifted toward her, then away. When he saw me in the doorway, something shifted in his face. Mom? I stepped inside slowly. "I'm here." Mara's smile stiffened. "Don't overwhelm him." "I just want to hear his voice," I said, not looking at her. "He doesn't need stories. He needs truth." Derek blinked a few times, his hand twitching against the sheet. "What happened?" "You collapsed," I said gently. "At work. You've been unconscious for over a week." He frowned. "The last thing I remember is I was in the office. I had a meeting. Investors. Nothing after that." Mara jumped in quickly. "You signed some important things before that, remember? We finalized the paperwork for the will, the transfer. You said you wanted everything settled." He stared at her. "I don't remember that." Callie was in the hallway watching. I gave her a small nod. She stepped in, pulled out her phone, and pressed play. The room filled with Mara's own voice, quiet but clear. "You were always too soft, Derek. You did your part. You signed what mattered." Derek's expression changed. His brows drew in. His mouth tightened. Callie stopped the recording. Silence filled the room. Mara's face went pale. Derek looked at me again, this time with something sharper in his eyes. Not confusion, clarity. "Where's the paperwork?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I want to see what she made me sign." The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No gallery of strangers, no press, just a handful of people sitting in the wooden benches and the soft hum of an overhead fan. The judge looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from seeing too many lies. Greta sat beside me, papers neatly stacked, calm as ever. Mara arrived late, sunglasses still on, pretending confidence she no longer had. Her lawyer whispered something to her before the judge entered, but his eyes told the truth. He was done fighting for her. When the hearing began, Greta spoke first, presenting the flash drive and the photos. Callie had provided an affidavit confirming the chain of custody, the timestamps, everything clean. The audio played again, Mara's voice cold and controlled, speaking of claims and deadlines. The judge didn't react outwardly, but I saw his pen stop moving mid-note. Her lawyer asked for a recess after that. 10 minutes later, he returned alone. "Your Honor," he said, "I can no longer represent my client." He gathered his briefcase and walked out without looking back. Mara stood, her voice rising. "He can't just leave. None of this is real. It's all been manipulated." The judge raised a hand for silence. "Mrs. Harrow, the evidence speaks for itself. Tristan never appeared. The subpoena had been delivered, but he'd vanished 2 days earlier. The police were already looking for him in connection with multiple counts of fraud. Then the screen lit up with Derek's face, pale but steady, calling in from his hospital bed. His voice cracked once, but he didn't falter. "I never signed those documents knowingly. I was drugged. I trust the people here who helped me prove it." When he finished, the judge leaned forward. "The transfers are hereby invalidated. All assets and property revert to Mr. Harrow until full investigation concludes." He signed the order, the sound of his pen striking finality into the air. Outside, the hospital's legal department confirmed an internal inquiry into IV tampering. Callie sent me a brief text later that day. "They're taking it seriously now." That night, I went back to Derek's room and found him awake, waiting. The new place was small, but it had windows that faced the morning sun. Derek chose it himself. No gate, No marble foyer, no manicured hedges. Just a square of quiet enough space to start over. I brought over towels and a set of dishes. He said he didn't need much, but I knew better. Starting from zero is easier when the cupboards aren't empty. He moved slower now. The recovery would take time, but his steps were steady. He still flinched when the phone rang, still scanned every envelope like it might hold another lie. But there was more color in his face, more weight in his voice. The fog had lifted. We unpacked in silence most of the afternoon. He sorted the files Greta had sent, bank statements restored, titles, copies of the court ruling. The damage was still visible in the margins, but the ownership was back in his hands. Late in the day, I found a small box labeled office drawer. I handed it to him without thinking, and he opened it on the couch. Inside were pens, 2 watches, and a crumpled photo of him and Mara from years ago. He stared at it a moment, then set it aside. "She said she loved me every day," he said quietly, "right up until the end." I didn't answer. I just opened the next box. "You saved me, didn't you?" he asked. I folded the packing paper and placed it neatly on the table. "You would have done the same for me." He didn't argue. He didn't try to make it poetic. That was what I appreciated most. No need to rewrite what had happened. I found the mugs near the bottom of a kitchen box and lined them on the shelf. One was chipped. He kept it anyway. As the sun dipped low outside the windows, we moved through the little kitchen, unwrapping the last of what he'd brought with him. No declarations, no triumph. Just the quiet rhythm of 2 people piecing something back together. 1 cabinet, 1 breath, 1 clean cup at a time.